misunderstanding Christianity as a performance-based relationship is that people have a spiritual experience that's predicated on action rather than interaction. Our spiritual experiences are predicated on how we act versus how we interact. In other words, what we see, the way that we relate to God, we believe that we relate to God by doing specific things, as opposed to interacting with Him, because we're misunderstanding it as a performance-based relationship. This the lexical model of working for Christ, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the idea that we work for Christ as opposed to working with Him. It's a language thing, it's a small thing, but it communicates and creates an expectation of performance reviews and merit-based increases. The same way you would have, they've got a set of standards that they expect you to meet. If you meet those things, you're great. You're expectation above expectation. If you don't, then you're below expectation, and we will promote you and give you raises and do whatever based on how you perform. That's what comes with the language of working for Christ, the imagery that we deal with, as opposed to the covenantal paradigm presented in Scripture, where God seeks to relate with people through the way that, or through interacting with them. Even within the context of the Old Testament, God enters into covenants that define the acceptable parameters of interaction. It's not just actions, but it's a way of interacting with God that He's setting up as a way that is acceptable and that's going to facilitate a healthy relationship with Him. Which basically is the way that healthy relationships should be built now. You interact with the person. Nobody gets married, well, I won't say nobody. Nobody's supposed to get married because of a series of things that a person does or doesn't do. Right. You interact, and there are actions that take place within the course of that interacting. But healthy relationships aren't based on a checklist of actions that require an evaluation on how well they're executed. Otherwise, I might not have got married. I don't know. I know somebody said no. Rather, they are established on the basis of meaningful, positive interactions that flow from the personhood of an individual. As we interact, we experience the character of God. As I interact with Carmen, I experience actions that flow from who she is. She experiences actions that flow from who I am. And we find those things to be positive, and it allows us to build a relationship. That's interaction, and it's not because I go to work, because I cut the grass, because sometimes I wash the dishes, because sometimes I help with the laundry. Those series of actions aren't the basis of the relationship. But that's exactly the approach that people take towards relating with God. I pay my tithes, I go to church, I sing in the choir, I'm on the usher board, I do this, I do that, I don't do this, I do this. And all of those things combined are a set of actions, and because I do those things, I'm okay with God. Performance-based misunderstanding. Just like because I go to church. Yeah. And actually, I have there's an example that I put out of a book that I'm going to get to in a second that deals exactly with that. If Christians use the idea of relating with a person when they relate with God, as opposed to a disassociated psychological mass, if we actually dealt with dealing with a person, they would not experience a shame because of their shortcomings. I wouldn't feel shame because I don't have it all together if I didn't feel like my entire relationship with God was contingent upon me complying with this series of actions. They would experience guilt when they acted outside of the parameters of a healthy relationship. You would experience guilt, but you wouldn't feel less valuable because you would realize that your value to God exists out of your personhood, not out of your actions. Which is why when somebody in this room will apologize because they didn't get to doing something that they normally would do, I could care less because I'm not there because of actions. I'm there because of personhood. I said that I wasn't going to say no names. Like I said, they should experience guilt, but shame wouldn't enter in the picture because they'd understand that their value is not predicated on performance. I'm not valuable because this is not a performance-based or shame-based dynamic that exists